Commissioner.
All right, Bannock County Commissioners are now in session. First item on our agenda is invoices, Commissioners report, credit applications. The one report is just jury. I went through it, and then on the Commissioners report, there was a couple of deals that I went down and talked to them about. We're just going to take this one off. Per diem for Reed. He's not our employee. So I want to know why we're paying per diem. You want
Okay.
So I crossed that off. I went down and talked to him. And then the other one is they charged Parks and Rec, they charged Scott for the backhoe down there in Downey. I mean, his guys were using it, but the process was to put the building down. So that needs to be charged to the fair board. So they're gonna change the coding on that. That's two things I had. Anything else? And
Right. Would you mind going and ask Adam to get on?
looks like we need to pay CCOG some money.
Came at the right time, Charity. Mr. Chair, I'd move that we approve the claims as presented.
You have a motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have payroll from 12:02 to 12:15.
Mr. Chair, I'd move that we approve the payroll report as presented.
Have a motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Then we have salary rate approval forms. The one comes with exceptions.
Correct. For the conflict attorneys. And that's just because of the grade increase, step increase that we put into that office to consolidate from 2 attorneys to the 1.
And that was the discussion that we had before
Correct.
hiring
Yep.
that position.
And it actually came in under what we had budgeted, so.
Mr. Chair, I'd move that we approve the salary rate approval forms as presented.
Have a motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nancy, you want to go ahead?
Commissioners, Dan Harrelson is here as well, if you have any questions, but we were awarded
This is the
the
new one.
Idaho Parks and Rec grant for the Connecting Communities Trail that Dan has been working on with Department of Green Trail in connection with ITD.
Comments, questions?
Nope.
Can you read that?
It's a good one. I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear everything she said.
Okay, this is the grant
Yeah,
for the walkway.
yeah.
And
Oh, yeah, okay.
any questions about it?
No.
Concerns?
Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve the Connecting Communities Grant as discussed.
Have a motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Well, that's good.
What do you got?
Thank you. All right, Ryan?
Okay, Mark, will you please come up? Just, sure. Let's see. Okay, thank you, Commissioners. We're on the agenda to address the matter we discussed a few weeks ago regarding our ported employees that were dropped. And I have Mark here to give an update on progress.
Okay.
Okay, well, progress was good. They are,
Introduce yourself.
oh, yes, Mark Siemens, Real Benefit Solutions. They decided to go ahead and reinstate all those coverages as they were before, which is really good because the rates that they were given before were super, super good rates. And they're going to do it back to the date and just carry it on.
Just like
Now-
without losing any coverage.
Yeah, without losing any coverage. Now, any new ported employees will port as per the new US Able policy. But as far as those 13 people, they're gonna maintain the rates and everything just the way that they are. So that was exactly what we were hoping for, and they did do that. Apologize for the slowness, but it's just the time of year where everything is slow. Now, one item that we discussed that I thought I ought to bring up is in having the leverage, I mentioned I might ask for other carriers' interest in the county, and there obviously was lots of interest. The Standard came back and offered the best rates on everything, and there would be a potential savings to switch all of these coverages to the Standard, which the county was with before LifeMap. A great company, one of the industry biggies and the like. It has the potential of saving the county about $1,300 a month. Now, that savings was on the group life insurance piece. Everything else, the disability, I had one carrier say, I don't know how they're doing those disability rates. We can't, that was Metropolitan, MetLife. They couldn't touch the disability rates, which makes you feel good that I know you've got a good contract. The only thing the Standard was able to come in more effective on was the group life insurance rates, but that's what it could mean to the county. So that is out there. Now, the one caveat is once I got the word that, okay, we'll reinstate and all that. I didn't continue to roll forward because I didn't want to waste a bunch of people's time in this busy season. So I figured we'd have this discussion. You tell me what you want me to do.
Well, that's one of them things we need to talk about probably in an executive session when we're comparing on contracts and stuff like that. I mean, we wasn't scheduled for it today, and that's
Okay.
not on the agenda.
Okay.
But it's one of them deals that if we get numbers and stuff, then we can have an executive session, actually compare company to company, and see
Okay.
how the county would like to go.
Okay.
That's what I'd like to do.
Yep, and so what I was thinking is for now, let's move forward with getting these ported people reinstated, stay with US Able for now, and then treat that as a separate item as potentially
Yeah, it'll have to be.
shopping.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I want to get these, have these people been notified?
Not
Our
yet.
employees.
We're waiting for
Not
this
yet.
meeting.
Okay.
One called me just wondering, and I did tell them, but I said we were having this meeting today, and I wouldn't know for sure what.
Okay. No, let's get them back on and let's get them taken care of.
Okay.
Agree? John, you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So,
And shopping can happen at any time. I mean, it can be next year if you don't want to bother with it now, but I just didn't want to just gloss over the fact that I did have
Well,
somebody
and
come
and
back.
as our agent, I would expect that. I'd expect you to come in and review with us and say, okay, I've been out shopping a little bit, this is what I found, and a direction that this would benefit the county or this would hurt the county. And just like this one, I want to make sure that if we're shopping for apples and the same brand of apple and type of apple, and that we're not
Yeah.
gonna have this situation come back up again.
Yeah, and this situation will not happen with with US Able because they do it differently. So if you were ever to switch away from US Able, all the ported people would stay in place, which is the industry norm. LifeMap was a bit of an anomaly,
Okay.
but it's an anomaly you find with smaller companies, which I kind of mentioned last time we met. But anyway,
Okay, no, let's move forward and get our people back where they're
okay?
informed.
okay, sounds good. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you very much.
You bet.
Appreciate your
You
work
bet.
there.
Okay,
Good job, Mark.
you bet. See you later.
Keep in touch.
All right.
Hal, your first item on the agenda. And this is the refund?
Yes, good morning. Commission, Hal Jensen, Planning Director, Bannock County. I have in front of you, and I have a hard copy for signature. This is a bond refund for the completion of
Mountain View Estates?
Mountain View Estates, Mountain View Ventures, which is now complete. And
So on this,
yes,
is this the road that we're having conflicts with the Yost and the other people?
so this is the subdivision that sits out on the corner of Reservation and I believe Rio Vista.
Okay.
Way out on the corner.
Okay, not the one that,
And
that's Oakdale Creek.
no, this would need bonding for completion. They were waiting for, because of the supply side, they were waiting for particular items such as mailboxes, et cetera. So
Okay.
under the statute of the ordinance, all improvements have to be complete. They couldn't be complete, wanted to sell a lot, start construction. We have the option to allow them to bond. So it's a $16,000 item.
Okay.
So
So, just a procedural thing, Hal, just for my understanding, says the final inspection was complete, or developer requested a final inspection completed on 7/31, and then they didn't call again for the final inspection, which was then completed on 11/30. So the difference between 7/31 and 11/30, we're waiting for them to call us back and say,
Correct.
please come back?
correct.
And so we don't have any kind of file system or tickler that says, hey,
Nope.
we've received this? Okay. Okay.
If they want their $17,000 back, they have to call.
No, I'm just, saw the discrepancy in the dates and just making sure that that was on them, not on us. So, Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve the refund of the bond for Mountain View Estates as presented.
We have a motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And then we're gonna wait a minute on Limelight, right here.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, well, let's talk about charity. Wes?
Good morning, Wes Jones, Office of Emergency Management and Charity Stags with Southeast Idaho Council of Governments. We've got some good information. We've gone through an administrative change or upgrade within Idaho Department of Lands. They've got a new employee that's got quite a bit of experience in grant writing and is aware of the processes for the review committee. And so because of that, she's been interfacing directly with Charity for an update on some of our applications and projects. So I'll just let Charity summarize that.
Yeah, absolutely. So originally, when we wrote these applications, it was recommended by IDL that we use as generic language as possible, which worked until federal side, USDA, started throwing those out. So this is our last chance. IDL is getting ready to submit these to the USDA, but wanted to give us a heads up, hey, we need to change these. We need to switch gears. So all yesterday, pushed through it. We just pushed through it. And when I submitted my agenda request, I had already made some changes at the time. But after I submitted that request, she called me, said we need to do more. So we did more. So for your convenience, I highlighted everything that we changed because I'm blindsiding you today. The first change was on the Lava Ranches application. So it's originally 9 Mile Phase 2. But when we made the changes, we realized it actually aligns perfectly with that current Lava Ranches project, which was formerly Smith Gulch, which is great. We love that. So we changed the project name to Lava Ranches Phase 2. Big Onion is the same. In Section 3 for the budget, the match, which is still covered by the landowner, is split between labor and supplies to cover seeding treatments. And we tried to explain in the application that we're not anticipating needing seeding treatments, but if we do, the landowners will be the ones to cover it. And they've already approved to do so. On section 5, the project area, we just revamped it to make it as specific to the area as possible. We explained the local problems in the area, local historical fires, and local challenges. On section 7, same with the proposed activities. However, to make them different, because paired applications that look the same have also been getting thrown out. The Lava Ranches, we focused on field breaks and landowner education. Lava Ranches Property Association had requested that we come in there and do some education for their landowners, so we went ahead and wrote that in there. And Big Onion is focused on field breaks along ingress and egress routes. On section 8, landscape impacts, same as project area, we just made them more specific to the local area. And then for section 11, we just added one line in there, which is the seeding treatments.
Okay, questions?
No, it's good work, Charity. Well done, especially under the gun. To get that detailed for each of these projects, that took some work.
It was something.
Yeah, that took some work, and I recognize what you did, so well done. Thank you for that. And so just to be clear, prior to this, we were following the state's direction and keeping things general. And then with the new person interfacing with the feds were coming back saying we want more detail like we've provided here.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, fantastic. Well, way to be responsive. Thank you.
These projects are moving forward.
Yep, so these are still in the application process. The next step is when IDL submits them to USDA, they're gonna pick the ones they want, and they're gonna come back and ask for more information. And hopefully, if they like them and they award them, we'll see an MOU around November of 2024, or late summer.
Yeah. But we have some that are in process now for next, that we'll send out to bid for potentially working on in the spring.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, the Lava Ranches Phase 1
Yeah.
is, we are just finishing up the treatment prescription process. I just sent it out for last feedback. And if I don't get anything before Friday next week, we're going to consider it final.
Yeah, okay. Well, again, appreciate it guiding us through the learning process with this. It seems like we're kind of in that start now, we're starting to move like it's supposed to.
It's starting to become a routine.
Yeah,
It's great.
fantastic.
Yeah, I think we've come a long ways in
We have,
the last couple of years. Thank you.
yep.
Sure.
Anything, John?
No.
All right.
Do we need to approve these? Approve the changes? Is that what
Yes,
you're looking
please,
for?
yeah.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve the changes on HFR grant adjustments for 9 Mile and Big Onion as discussed.
9 Mile or Lava Ranch?
Or, yes, the new title is Lava Ranch, so yeah.
Okay, okay.
Lava Ranch Phase 2.
Okay. All right, we have a motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Shanda?
Good morning, Commissioners. Shanda Purcell, Chief Procurement Officer. I have 3 items before the board today. The first, I'd like to discuss a reallocation of disposal vehicles. I've had 2 departments contact me with vehicles that they feel can be better used elsewhere in the county, and so I'm coming to the board with a list of those vehicles and a proposed recommendation that if the board approves, that I get with Road and Bridge to figure out what are our lowest hanging fruit, the cars that need to be done and off to auction, and see if these will be a good fit for those departments, and then bring back a recommendation to the board of where these vehicles might be used. There's some of them, as listed in here, that Road and Bridge has already gone through and can't, get parts readily for, and there's 4 of them that they would already recommend that we go ahead and get rid of altogether. But the other 4, I would recommend that we work with Road and Bridge to identify potential uses for and bring those possibilities back to the board for discussion.
They're all getting up there in mileage. I'm just kidding, get rid of us. Anything? don't want a bunch of cars hanging around people's lot yards just to
Right, just
say
to
we have a
them,
car in there,
right?
so.
There are a couple that departments have already caught wind of this and said, right, that I have an older car, more mileage, right? I would love to trade it out. So we would look at those
They
possibilities.
have older and more mileage than this?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, that Impala, 209,000. I mean,
It's been well loved.
why is it still there?
Welcome to Bannock County.
No, let's move on. Any questions, comments?
So are you wanting to let her talk to these departments that want these, that are not auctioned? or-
Well, I want Road and Bridge to look at them, to
Yeah.
say if there's any value in them at all.
And I guess we should look at, so if you've got people with older cars that are trying, and worse than this, that they're trying to get rid of, maybe we should have Road and Bridge look at that too, and just kind of see with this mix, this big mix of cars, what do we do?
Yeah.
So that is, yes, the recommendation, is to have Road and Bridge review our current fleet
Yeah,
and see where these 4 cars, excuse me, might be able to update our fleet. I was gonna say, I have a cough drop in there, but thank you. So yes, that is the recommendation, is to see if we can't update
right.
and get more efficient cars that we have. If not, right, then the recommendation would be that that all of them go to auction.
Okay.
And the 4 that they've already said need to go to auction, don't worry about them, just take them to auction.
Okay.
Anything else?
I apologize. I have just an, my second item was going to be a recommendation to award. We went out for RFP for Family Specialist Services. That hasn't been completed evaluation yet. And so I would like to postpone that one and take it off your agenda today. And the last item I have is a procurement update. There are 2 projects I'd like to update the board on. The first is the Road and Bridge bulk fuel for the county. That has been published this week and last week, and we have invited 3 local companies to participate in that one as well. That is we wanted to make sure that we could get the most notice out there possible, and so it is out there for quite a while. We are not doing a pre-bid, as it's very standard to deliver fuel, so we're not doing a pre-bid or anything like that. But we have it open, and our next is that it'll be open for any questions that providers might have for us. And the last one is just wanting to touch base with the board on the detention center roof. We still do not have that warranty yet. We have had a few struggles with that contractor getting an individual out here to finish the punch list for the manufacturer that they've given us. Levi is on top of it. And I did offer, if necessary, a letter from our legal counsel that says these items will be finished by this deadline, or you will pay somebody else to do them. So I have offered that up to Levi. He knows that he's got access to that, and he'll let me know if he wants to move on that or not. Is there any questions for the procurement projects?
Good,
Great, thank you.
thank you. So next on the agenda, we have our tax cancellation request. These are the ones we talked about the other day. A couple of them are anyway. Christ Vineyard Church and the outfit and
Yeah.
McCammon. Any questions?
No.
Motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd move that we approve the tax cancellation request as presented.
Motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have Resolution 2023-101, approving tax cancellation. And then Resolution 2023-102, authorizing special counsel.
Mr. Chair, I'd move that we approve Resolution 2023-101 and -102.
We have a motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Go Nancy. And then we have approval of meeting minutes for December 18th, 19th, and 21.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the meeting minutes for December 18, 19, and 21.
Motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, that brings us up to our limelight discussion.
Are we doing the Pocatello Hospital
No.
thing? That's canceled?
Yeah, we pulled it today. Christie has some worries with the turnaround time as far as when we make the payments to Port. If they wanted either prepaid, and if it wasn't prepaid, they wanted 14 days payment. We're trying to get that extended in case you guys are out of town or something doesn't get signed in time. And so that's been pulled until.
And that's the only reason? All right. Is there anything else on the agenda besides limelight?
Nope.
Okay.
That's why I saved it to last.
I was hoping that was the case, but when I saw this, I wanted to make sure.
All right, come on up. All right. So our legal counsel's not here.
Alan is supposed to be here at 9:30. Apparently, he had court and Brian instructed him to be here about that. Do you want me to run down and see if we can grab him?
No.
Okay.
So this is the judicial review has come back to us and they want some more information. So let's just walk through this and we're looking at our experts for direction.
Thank you, Commission. Under judicial review, this has been remanded back for clarification of findings of fact and conclusion and findings for clarification on what was originally deliberated under the concept plan, which was then appealed, which then came to the Commission and the Commission upheld. It was then taken all the way to judicial by the appellant. Therefore, here we are to talk about clarification of the Commission's supporting of the findings. Judge said, clarify. So we have any information that you may need or any other additional questions that have arisen from the last conversations. By introduction, Hal Jensen, Planning Director, Bannock County. I have with me Tristan Brooklyn, Assistant Director, Bannock County. Anything that you have for us, we'll be more than happy to address and help clarify. I'll leave it at that at this point if you have items for us.
Okay, so basically there's, how many questions? 6?
We've got 6 or 7 findings. And I can go through and read them, and if you guys want to discuss them, we can go that way.
Please, that would help.
Okay, let's just start with number 1 finding.
Chairman, before we get started on this, I'd like to make a statement about ex parte communications and that type of thing,
Okay.
and outside meetings that have been had. So before I was elected as a commissioner, I watched the videos of these things. And I remember watching one of the, I think it was maybe you had a meeting in May or something like that. And I recollect watching this on the video, and of course, planning and zoning was something I was not as familiar with as some other aspects of what a commissioner does, and so I was very interested in this case because it seemed to be some objections to it and so on. So I did speak with one of the plaintiffs in the case, Larry Bybee, and asked him, you know, what is your issues with this thing? And I honestly can't remember exactly what he told me, but something about, you know, CCRs and an easement and things of that nature. And I went up there and took a look at this area so I could kind of get a picture of it in my mind, what was going on up there. And I remember seeing, I think there was a fire suppression tank that I saw. I think I saw some work being done where this Limelight Estates is, where I guess they're building some big structures that are like, I don't know, places to shed shops or something like that. I saw the bus stop that's been discussed in the case, and obviously paid attention to the road coming up. There's complaints about a fire hazard down the hill, saw that, and so on. So I just wanted to make sure it was on the record that I have had outside communication on this prior to becoming a commissioner, and I have looked at the area, and but I don't feel like anything that I saw really isn't addressed in this information that you've given us, but it did give me a better picture of kind of what the thing looks like. I don't feel like that will impact anything with respect to my being able to discuss this.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. All right, let's start.
Ready? Okay. So the first question was disregarding IDAPA Rule 58.01.11.400.01, which DEQ warned the conceptual development violated?
What are you reading?
These are the criteria that were sent back, I believe, in the court's findings.
Is this the?
This is the information that Brian had sent to you yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, so just for a little clarification, there are 6 criteria of approval that council have to deliberate for every concept plan. So those are the ones that we do need additional findings and facts on. And then there are the additional 7 that Brian sent over that were the alleged deficiencies from the judicial review.
Okay.
So the first one that Braden read, those are the deficiencies
Okay.
that were pointed out as part of the judicial review.
Because I was looking at the 6 questions that they're supposed to review when they did the concept plan review. I have those 6 questions here and all the findings of that, et cetera. And then this is a separate thing that Brian has, these separate 7
So,
questions.
Correct.
but my opinion is if we go over the 6 that the board reviews, answer them. I'm not gonna go in specifically on all these.
On the alleged deficiencies?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's an opinion from reading it. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them all talk about the exact same thing out of that. So what I would like to do is go over the questions, and this is where I've talked it before, the process. How do we make our process so that we don't have these, so that we have the answers when people ask? And so I'd like to go to what the board reviewed. That's number 1. Let's look at it, and then we'll get your opinion on what's here, and then we can have a conversation on number 1, okay?
Just according to the record of Limelight that you guys have already reviewed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, Chairman. Just to make sure I'm clear on everything, you're going to go through the questions first, and then we're going to have a discussion if we have issues with any part of. Because I do have questions as we're going to go through this.
And that's fine, but we can add, I mean, if you've gone out and looked at it and stuff, and you have different questions from what that board answered with, that's an addition to me,
I have questions on the record.
on the record, okay.
Yes.
And
I have
that's-
no questions about anything I looked
Okay.
at. It just gets me kind of a picture of what it looks
Yeah,
like.
no, but if we have questions about what's on the record, so that this is the process that we need to get down, is when we get this question, how are we able to answer it with the information that is before us? So that everybody's comfortable, that we're following the county's rules.
Yeah, so that's what I have questions on, is this record, and this is what I went through the last couple of days, and obviously you can see I've got lots of.
Okay, well, let's start out with number 1, so that we just, in an organized
So-
manner.
So
we're
just to
gonna-
make sure I understand it, they're gonna go through all of it, and then we'll go back individually and discuss each section?
No, we'll talk about them one-on-one
As we go.
as we go through. We'll talk about each one individually as we go
And
down.
just to clarify to all 3 of you too, Brian did want me to mention anything, that- of course, the record is included, but anything in addition to the record, emails that you were sent by staff, anything of that nature is also available for you to make your decision, as an aid.
Okay, thank you.
That said, I believe that when it was remanded back to the commission and not the council, I believe that you have to clarify and create not new findings of fact, but substantiate the findings of fact of the council.
And I agree with you 100%.
Okay.
It's not new. We're not calling new witnesses in. We're not,
Right.
this is
Correct.
the information that was presented, and we
Yes.
elaborate on it to prove our point.
Then we are prepared to help.
Okay, let's start with number 1. You read that question.
So number 1 is the proposed tentative plan is or is not in conformance with the Bannock County Comprehensive Plan, is or is not in conformance with applicable provisions of this ordinance, other county ordinances, and Idaho code.
On the original findings that we reviewed regarding the permitted uses, single-family dwellings with accessory buildings are allowed in the RS structure. That's cut and dry. According to our ordinance, what they're asking for is allowed.
Correct.
Okay. And then number 2, the proposed development lot size range from 1.47 acres, lot 11 to 10.97 acres, lot 7, which is permitted in an open space designed subdivision. Meets our ordinance. They're not asking for anything new, anything different.
No.
And density is 1 dwelling unit, 3.43 acres, which 3 times plus maximum density. They meet all criteria for our ordinance.
Correct.
Okay.
So, for Commissioner Crowder's benefit, in this particular zone, under an open space subdivision, many people are confused relative to lot size and density. When you do an open space subdivision, you're required to take, let's use 50 as an even number. If you have 50 acres, 25 of those acres are required to be open space. But in that process, it also allows you to have a greater density, which means your lot size can get smaller. In this particular zone, you have to have a minimum lot size of 2.5 acres rather than 5 or whatever the other requirements of the ordinance may be. Commissioner Moser read that the density on this particular subdivision is 3.4, which is greater than the 2.5 as a requirement.
Okay. hold
Certain
on.
lots can be-
Let me interrupt you just a second.
Okay.
Because I want to make sure I understand everything you're saying.
Mhm.
Did you say the minimum lot size is 2.5 acres?
Correct.
It's actually 1.
Oh, it is 1
Yeah.
in this zone?
It's
Okay,
residential
it's 1.
suburban.
Okay.
Okay, because I'm reading here, it's
My
that the
mistake.
minimum lot size is 1.47
Well,
in this case.
correct.
But 1 is the
Yes,
minimum,
so 1 is the minimum.
not 2.5.
Correct.
Okay.
But the one thing to remember is that it's the ratio of the lots. You might have a lot that's 1.4, and you might have another that is 5.7. Average them together, and you find out that, just an FYI, it becomes confusing to people as we go through this process in an open space subdivision, depending on the particular zone you're in, whether it's residential, rural, or residential suburban. There are different rules and regulations of those ratios and densities, so this is compliant.
You're talking about 2 different things, ratio, density, and lot size.
Correct. There's a number of.
Is the
things to
lot
check.
size a hard and fast rule of 1 acre?
A minimum
Minimum.
lot size, yes.
But the density, you could have 1 acre, 1 acre, 1 acre, 10 acres, and then it averages out.
Correct.
Okay.
Hopefully I did not confuse you. I wanted that to be a point of clarification.
You almost did. So-
Okay, sorry.
Okay. So, anything else on number 1?
Well, there's other sections here.
The subdivision ordinance?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, open space subdivision. And this one, was there any questions on it?
No.
Did you have questions on it?
I did have some questions on it. So, I know they talk about the groundwater, there's issues there that have been brought up, and they're talking about septic tanks and wells in this thing.
And let me just say right there, we have zero to do with wells. We have zero to do with groundwater.
Okay,
As our boards, they have zero say on. That goes to the health department and to the DEQ. So after it comes through this process, then they have to get their permittings. And that's where all that comes in. But we have zero say on that
okay,
as Bannock County.
all right.
And that's where I say on this deal that Brian sent out,
And
water.
just to follow up with John's
And sewer.
question, in regards to the zoning ordinance itself, that is not there's no water issues or septic issues taken into when they're talking about open space and lot sizes and designs that way. Is that correct?
Correct. So, and not as a point of nitpicking, we're talking about the subdivision ordinance. And then there are applications of the zoning ordinance that then piggyback on that. But we're talking about the subdivision of land. So once again, for Commissioner Crowder's benefit, Idaho Department of Water Resources, it's a state entity, has nothing to do, I shouldn't say it has nothing to do with Bannock County. It does, however, Idaho statute says if you have an acre or greater, you have a right to water. And so we never see any well applications, we never see well requests, et cetera, because that's all taken care of by another state entity, another state jurisdiction. Department of Environmental Quality will do a general review of a subdivision and send us a letter. Their letter in this particular instance were recommendations. They weren't absolutes that you will do this. And so under the fact that it's just a recommendation, it's deliberated, shall we say, lightly. It's not really a part of what we do because we don't have anything in our ordinance, in our subdivision ordinance, that directly ties us to a you shall. So therefore, in this particular instance and in this subdivision, these were done under recommendations and briefly discussed. Okay?
Okay, so as I'm looking at this review that we got, and this was the large packet that you guys sent me a couple of days ago, I guess it was.
So, and Commissioner Crowder,
Yes,
that
sir.
was the original packet that the council deliberated on the concept plan from
Right.
way back. Okay.
Okay. So the first section, which Commissioner Moser discussed, was, and this is all under question 1, the first part of it is zoning ordinance conformance, residential suburban district. And the first part was subdividing, which is what he discussed. But then the next section talks about subdivision ordinance conformance general review, open space subdivisions. That's what we're talking about here,
Correct.
right? And then it lists here 10 criteria, design criteria, that it says open space subdivisions will be designed to.
Yes.
So when you're planning and zoning council, or I guess this would be the planning department is reviewing this, you're looking at all of 10 of these things to see if the proposal conforms to this?
That is
that correct? Okay. And so they have such things as, and you know, water's mentioned everywhere. Every time we talk about anything, water comes up, and water is mentioned here. And so number 3 here says save water by using multi-party wells or community water systems if municipal utilities are not available.
Correct, which is a recommendation. It's not an absolute.
But then when I go up to 401.B, design criteria, it says open space subdivisions will be designed to. It doesn't say may be designed to, it says will be.
Okay.
And then we come down to that part I just read. Save water by using multi-party wells.
Okay.
So is that not according, the way I read this, that's a requirement.
That has not been enforced, if that is your interpretation previously in other subdivisions of open space that we've done in the county.
With every single subdivision we've had, this is brought up. And at one time, trying to file for a permit for a multi-use system, the state wasn't issuing any. There was a conflict of what was stated and what was available. And so I've talked to Jefferson County, we've had the same discussion, that we tell a contractor, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do that. And then when they go try to do it, they're not allowed to do it. And so, and it comes up multiple times, well, you should be a municipal, you should be hooking into the city of Pocatello. I've had that appealed on, when I sit on the Board of Health board. We had some people in Chubbuck that went to the city of Chubbuck to try to get hooked up to the city of Chubbuck, and they wanted to charge them $45,000 because they may hook up more than one unit on the ground. All they went in to do was hook up one, so they was charging them 5 times what the rate should be. So we as the Board of Health voided that and says, no, you can go ahead and get your septic system, because they were supposed to, because they was within 300 feet to hook up, and we voided that because the city was trying to overcharge them. But these guys, this one here, they're a quarter-mile away. They don't have to hook up to the city. That may be a recommendation, but they do not have to do that. You cannot put that as a requirement.
And I do believe in the packet it says that they did build the septic so they could connect should the city move their stuff up there to a spot where they could. So it's designed and built for connection when that time comes.
And that's the contractor willing to do that for further connections, but they weren't required to do that.
Is the water the same way designed so that it can connect to city?
I'm sorry, what did you just say?
I think it says in here that the water is designed the same way so that should the city run the city water up into that area, then they can all connect.
Yes.
So it is designed with that future in mind. So to me, it meets that because it was designed that way.
Well, and I think to help with that will versus may, that's in the ordinance too. So 401B3 is where it says that it will be required, but then if you look at A, it says shall be required when practical. And so I think that's where Commissioner Moser is saying it's not practical when they're not permitting those community systems after you get done with the subdivision. So
I'm sorry, run that by me again?
So it has the will be required at the beginning of that section, but
Right.
then in 3 specifically, when it's talking about saving water, it says that those shared utilities such as multi-party wells or community water systems shall be required when practical.
And why is it not practical? That's the part I'm wondering.
So that's what Commissioner Moser was talking about, where they were not permitting those community well permits through IDWR, or it was extremely difficult to get access to those systems, which would then be an impractical burden to put on a developer to require something that's not possible to permit.
Weren't you talking about something to do with SIF as far as this?
No.
What was your story?
Well,
again, where you
that
said-
one was the sewer, that's not the water.
Yeah.
That one was the septic system. But, like Al said, you're allowed water if you have an acre of ground.
Right.
These community wells are not the same in the way that they evaluate them, is what I understood. Is that because you're wanting to put in a community well, they weren't putting out permits for that. But you have the right on your property for a well if you have 1 acre of ground.
Okay. So everybody in Idaho has a right for a well if they have an acre of ground, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
If they find it on their own property, I mean, you don't have the right to go to a lot of other people. I mean, you can't go on somebody else's property and claim that you have water rights just because you have an acre of ground over here.
I'm sorry.
Well, I can't come on your property and say, well, I couldn't find water on my ground. I have an acre over here, but I have a legal right for water. I can't come on your property
Right,
and
right, right. Okay.
drill a well.
All right, so let me just, and I'm sorry this has taken so long. but
No, I want this done.
This is a bit complicated, yeah. So, anyway, going back to this again. So like I said, it said, will be designed to save water by using multi-party wells or community water systems if municipal utilities are not available. Okay? Then we go down and it talks about the when practical part. And your contention is that it's not practical because permits are not being issued? Is that the contention here?
That was not discussed.
Because you just told me it was not practical, and you referred to Commissioner Moser. Why is it not practical?
The sewer system's not practical because they're a quarter mile away. And it says that you don't have to do that.
Mhm.
It says if you're within 300 feet, then you're supposed to hook up. If you're not, I mean, there's a discussion about that and that whole thing. And they spent an hour talking about all that in these notes that we got. And, but they're not required.
Okay, and so I'm gonna move to another document here real quickly. And this is the Limelight Estates April 20 audio clerk transcript. And on page 14, you have Dustin Manwaring, who represents Jesse Ward in this. And he makes the statement, we've worked hard to develop and plan the subdivision well under the allowable density, foregoing profit to conserve. Future septic tanks, as a matter of CCRs, will be placed as to facilitate and aid connections of sewers eventually available in the area and will be required to connect.
In the future.
Yes,
And that's what Jeff just talked about.
right, exactly. And so, are there CCRs in place? Because this is relying, so to make this statement, he's relying on the CCRs. Are there CCRs in place to do this? And is that what they say?
So, one item of clarification, we don't enforce CCNRs because they're not in our ordinance. So therefore, we have no practical. That is just a good faith effort of the developer to state, let's say that, as a general rule of thumb, Commissioner, most people put a septic tank in a drain field to the backside of their house. So therefore, their sewer line goes out the back of the house, and if a sewer in the future comes in, it's typically placed in a utility easement or in a right-of-way, which is at the front of the house. The statement there is to let them know, let the council know that in the future, should utilities be provided to this subdivision, such as water and sewer, it is much easier to connect rather than routing a new future sewer line either underneath the existing slab of a house, around the back and all the way to the front, etc. So it's just a point of clarification for future development if and when it occurs for connection to utilities of sewer and water.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, they made that as a statement in their CCNRs in good faith that connecting to future utilities should be easier than traditional approaches of putting everything to the back of the house. Okay?
So it seemed to me that the attorney Manwaring, in making this statement, was really looking back to this other part that I had just read and saying, this is how we are going to meet this down the road.
If that's your interpretation, I don't believe that was the intent.
You don't believe that was the intent?
No.
My interpretation would be that we're preparing for the future. If this is annexed into the city,
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna make it so that the houses that we're building now And those in the future, those that we're building now will be able to hook up to the city sewer and water without a lot of concern or problems. Those in the future will be required, if it's already in there, will be required to hook up. So they were just planning for the future, for a direction. And the homeowners won't come in later and say, well, you never told me this was gonna happen.
Mr. Jensen,
In plating out their subdivision, they're saying, this is a direction we'd really like to see.
Hal, would it be safe to assume that if the subdivision is built so far with all of the septic and sewer and water already installed and designed to hook up to the city, that would be in their CCNRs for future homes that come in there?
Correct.
Okay, because you wouldn't build half of it with that in mind and then not do it with the other half?
Correct.
Okay. But we don't have any of those CCNRs in here to look at, but that is just a basic assumption that,
Correct.
okay.
Have the CCRs already been developed?
Yes.
And they have this provision in them that they will be required to connect to, if the city does, let me just look at this again, because this does seem to address the first question I had.
So an item, going back to that, if you are not in city limits,
Right.
you don't have to connect. So let's assume that somebody comes across a huge amount of money and they decide, as a developer, that it would be better, now that half of their subdivision is done, but now the other half that's not developed, the bare lots, they go in and they put sewer in. There's nothing that says that they have to connect.
There's nothing in what that says they have to connect.
Any future homes that are built, let's say 50% of it is built out, okay?
Yeah.
Then he comes across a large amount of money and he goes in and he puts a sewer in for the whole subdivision. But it's still in the county and it's not in the city. Until it's annexed, then they would be forced to connect. But if it was still quote unquote under our jurisdiction, it's just in good faith,
I see.
okay?
Yeah, but if the city were to annex it, then they would have to connect.
Then they have
is
to
what you're
connect.
saying. And what if one of the homeowners says, I don't want to connect, I like my septic the way it is?
That becomes a civil issue between the adopting jurisdiction, which would be the city,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
And so here, the reliance seems to me to be on the CCR provision that to make sure this is all going to work out, that once it comes in there, this says they will be required to connect. That's a provision in the CCRs, I believe.
Yeah, Commissioner, that's a long
I'm sorry?
That's a long ways away in this
Yeah,
lifetime.
okay, fine.
I mean, if and when
Yeah,
is a what-if hypothetical that there's no answer to the timeline,
Right.
okay?
And I would point out that this is a review of the record more so than anything else, and the CCNRs are not part of the record, so I don't think it'd be appropriate for you to consider what is or is not in the CCNRs unless they're in the record. So basically, we have to treat them as if they don't exist, or that they may exist.
Well,
but
he
they
brings
aren't.
them up in the record.
Correct, but they aren't part of the record. They themselves aren't part of the record.
Well, they themselves might not be, but this statement is part of the record.
Correct.
And this seems to address the question I had about being required to do this. It seems like it addresses.
I understand the concern for sure, but as part of your fact finding, you're finding certain facts here, and we can't consider things that are outside of the record as far as those facts. So that's just my thought on that.
CCRs, is that like a contract between the developer and the buyer? What is it? Can you explain how that works exactly?
Well, it would be covenants on the. It would be restrictions, potential restrictions that are on the property themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that I wouldn't consider it so much contract as more like a deed restriction, that you would not be allowed to do certain activities.
Or would be required to do certain activities.
Or yes, could be the other way around. We're
Right.
required to have certain,
And those are enforceable in court, I assume.
they could be, yes, for
By
sure.
the housing association, not by us.
Correct.
We have zero to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So give me just a second here. So there was another question here. About roads and such. I think that was still in section 1, approved road or street at part 402. And so there was an exception or made for, I guess we have a current road right-of-way that is 60 feet. But when this plan came into, was first proposed, at that time it was 50 feet. And so they said, well, we're gonna make this an exception because this is when he came in and he wanted 50 feet. And so that's gonna be okay in this case, is that right?
Correct. Yeah, and that's part of criteria number 2.
Oh, I thought that was part of still 1. We're not, I actually accidentally jumped to the next one.
Yes, yeah.
All right, I guess we'll move on to part 2.
But in his defense, there is a comment there under, like you said, 402, staff findings and facts, and it talks about roads, and it talks about on what, page 6 on what my notes are here, but it said the road right-of-way for Limelight has been accepted at 50 feet prior to the adoption of new road standards. Lot 12, possible future access should be consistent with current road right-of-way width, road and bridge review, and agreed with road. So I think it was actually that driveway that was being talked about there. Right now, it's not a road, it's a driveway.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's turned into a road, it needs to have the 60-foot right-of-way.
Mhm.
That's why it's highlighted where it's at. And that's another deal. It's not platted that way right now, it's not designed that way. It's a driveway.
So that was discussed in part 1. That's
Yeah,
what I
it's
thought I
right
read.
here. And so,
Mhm. So are the only facts that you're looking to discuss is this part in the first part, not the rest of this discussion here?
well, it's whatever happened in the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we have the ability to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
We can't add to and take away from. But if you look at all the notes and all the information from each of the meetings, it varies. They wandered a little bit in their discussions, and they kept going back. And that's why I say when we just go to what was put in these 6 questions, and what their reasoning was, that's, how did they come to that conclusion?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Did they come to that conclusion with a justifiable explanation?
Mm-hmm.
And if they did, then we're good. If they didn't, then we have to have the information from all their notes to change a justification, in my opinion.
And I know when you had your meeting, when they had the meeting, boy, there's so many meetings here, I'm not sure I'm getting the right one, but when one of the meetings, I think it was the final meeting before it ended up going out of the planning and zoning, you were talking about these 6 criteria. And each, I remember reading in the transcript, each one of them took turns saying, okay, well, I'll take number 1, and this is what I'm going to say for this reason, and so on. And then at the end of that meeting, they placed certain conditions on this. Are you intending to discuss the conditions? And is that part of the approval?
We can discuss the conditions if you'd like. So once a subdivision moves on to preliminary plat, council reviews that preliminary plat to make sure that all of those conditions were met. So all of the conditions that they placed during this concept meeting, they reviewed at preliminary plat, made sure they were all met, and it was part of the approval process for that second step of the subdivision.
So when they make this decision, the Planning and Zoning Council, they're sitting up there, and I've watched only really one of their meetings to see how this works, and then read this. You know, they go through, they find all the 6 criteria are met, and then they say, here's our conditions. So it's not just the 6 criteria. The conditions must also be met to move forward.
Correct.
Okay. And if they're not met, then what happens?
Then council can choose to deny the preliminary plat. They could table it and require them to come back after they have met those criteria, or they could also create additional conditions at the preliminary plat stage that would have to be met at final plat.
Okay. So you're going to go through all of this then? Because I mean, I want you to go through everything that's required for approval. So I'm assuming you're going to go through these 6 criteria and then the conditions. Is that right?
Yeah, if you would like to, we can. So part of the judicial
If it's
review
part of
was.
the approval.
Yeah, so it was just to make reasoned statements, reasoned findings of fact of the concept approval.
Yeah.
So if we need to review the conditions as well to make sure that the conditions are reasoned and make sense, we can always do that too.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about that, the process, they submit some plans. Well, just go through, when the contractor comes in, when this first started, how it started and where we're at right now. Did you hit the steps?
Yeah. So the first step is a pre-development meeting. So typically, the developer or applicant would come in, apply for a pre-development application, which includes a sketch plan of what they're proposing to do. It can be a very rough sketch of just how many lots they're looking to do, where their roads are approximately going to be placed. And as part of the application process, they also have to submit any agency comments that they received from a list of agencies that we provide them. So we provide them a 2-page list of agencies' email addresses, and they are required to contact them twice, at least a week apart. Any comments that they receive from those agencies, they have to attach to that pre-development application. If they don't receive comments from the agencies, they just have to attach proof that they've contacted them twice. So typically they'll attach a PDF copy of their email showing that they have emailed all of these agencies and they didn't receive any comments back. At that point, we can schedule the pre-development meeting. We meet with them at planning and development and discuss what they need to do to move forward with concept. So if there are deficiencies in their sketch plan that don't meet ordinance, we kind of highlight those items for them so that they know what they need to submit in order to have a solid concept plan application prior to going to council. Then your second step after that pre-development is this step, the concept plan, which is a public hearing and goes in front of council. At this step, they can place those conditions that we were talking about earlier, and then they have as much time as they need, up to a year, to go from concept to preliminary plat. At the preliminary plat stage, they go back to council as a business item, and council, through a staff report, will review whether it meets those criteria for approval. So different than the concept criteria, it's 4 different criteria of approval. And then they review the conditions as well, make sure that they meet the conditions that were placed at concept. At preliminary plat, they can also place different conditions or new conditions if they feel that there are other conditions that need to be placed at preliminary plat. Then once preliminary plat is done, they can submit their final plat application. Their final plat consists of 3 steps. They have to have their draft final plat meeting all conditions from both concept and preliminary plat. They have to have a surveyor plat review, which is an additional surveyor reviews their surveyor's work to make sure it meets Idaho code. And then they submit their construction plans for review. So their road work, utilities, all of that is part of that application. Once all of that is complete and done, then they're ready for signatures and final approval. Once they have signatures from all other agencies, including Southeast Idaho Public Health, they come before the county commissioners for final signature and approval.
And that's the developer does all this stuff?
Yes.
And where is the developer in this process at the moment, that you just outlined, this long process? Where are they at?
We've got a final plat recorded, and we have a subdivision legally in place.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
So that means that all the conditions were met, all this stuff was
correct.
approved?
So, and that's kind of my point here is we've checked all the boxes.
Mhm.
We've gone through and the board looked at everything and we've moved far enough that they've had a half dozen meetings or more. And we've gone clean to the final plat, and we have a subdivision that's just sitting there
Mhm.
that has a court order that says you can't do anything on it right now
Mhm.
until we go clean back to the start
Mhm.
and say, give me a reason why you said you could do that.
Mhm.
I mean,
Which are these 6 items?
because of these 6 items. And I think that what we need to do now is answer these 6 items.
So in the interest of moving this forward, if we were to answer number 1 right now, based on what we've discussed, we would say, the plan is in conformance with Bannock County Comprehensive Plan, and it is in conformance with the applicable provisions of the county based on our review of, like we just went through, Section 401, open space design criteria. It checks off all of those boxes. And in response to the Save Water, it is designed to connect to city utilities when made available. And 401C, the open space, it meets the open space requirement by acreage and density. And the approved road meets the Bannock County requirements. That would be the proper way to answer that, Alan?
Correct. I may suggest addressing the multi-party wells portion of it as well.
What do you mean by, clarify that for me, please?
Because that was one of the points of contention, was that multi-party wells were not implemented in the subdivision. There was discussion about where practical, commissioners, if you find that it was not practical to have multi-party wells, I don't know how much more discussion could be had on that based on the record itself, but that is one of the criteria that
So we just highlight where feasible. We didn't feel like it was feasible.
But we'd have to say why.
yeah, we need a basis for saying why it's not practical, not just a conclusory statement. Maybe say it's not practical because of.
Because of the cost to the developer and the city of Pocatello's intent to provide utilities at a near future date.
Okay. Yeah,
That works?
that works.
Can you repeat that?
We didn't, we agreed with the staff findings because we did not feel that the cost was appropriate for the developer due to the city of Pocatello Due to the city of Pocatello bringing in the utilities at a future date. Is that kind of what I said?
The potential.
And
The-
you also said that right now it'd be financially,
Financially not feasible for the developer.
That's because of the distance, the quarter mile.
Where's
instead of
Braden?
Yeah.
Where's our note taker? Where's our scribe when we need him? You got it? Nancy has it? Okay. Thank you, Nancy. All right. Any further questions on one?
No, not at this time.
Okay, let's go to question number 2.
Question 2 is this is the water, or the roads and bridges. So code 402 approved road or street. That's what we're looking at here.
Yeah, would you like me to read it?
Yes, please.
The proposed roads and bridges are or are not designed and constructed according to section 402 of the subdivision ordinance. A design deviation was or was not requested and was or was not granted to equal or exceed these standards for its purpose. And council found that they are designed and constructed according to the subdivision ordinance. A design deviation was requested and was granted.
And that was that 60 to 50 feet?
Correct.
And then
And you're talking about is that the driveway we're talking about?
So
Is
that's
that the-
Limelight Lane.
Where's, okay,
That's the road that's coming off of Stephanie Road.
okay.
And it's at 60 feet or 50 feet?
It's 50 feet.
50 feet.
So it was constructed prior to the plat. The developer went through a minor land division prior to platting the remaining piece. And so as part of the minor land division, he chose to move forward with developing the road at that time instead of waiting for the plat. And during the minor land division, the road and bridge requirements were 50 feet, so it met the requirement at that time. And then between the minor land division approval and the start of the plat, that's when Road and Bridge adopted their new roadway standards that changed from 50 feet to 60 feet. So they requested a design deviation to stay at that 50-foot right-of-way since they had just developed it under a prior policy.
And Road and Bridge has accepted that road?
Correct.
Based on that prior policy and everything?
Yes.
And so down the line, he's not going to be asked to now make it 60 feet. This is it, it's 50
It's,
feet.
yep, it's 50 feet.
Okay.
Okay. So on that one, we're at number 2, Braden.
Okay.
So on number 2, our finding
Mm-hmm.
is the road and bridge is evaluated, and the road was in prior existence, and 50 feet met the prior standard, and so we're going to allow it to stay at 50 feet.
And was granted as a design deviation.
It's grandfathered, basically.
Gotcha.
Anything else on round 2?
The only thing on 2, and they talked about it quite a bit, was the second access via Gibson Jack Road. And again, I concur with staff findings that again was financially not feasible and probably more detrimental to the hillside to do that second access road due to the steepness of the terrain surrounding that. So Pocatello Volunteer Fire Department signed off on it, thought it was okay. And so between those two things, I would concur with staff finding as well.
The other item to remember is that this is an open space design subdivision, so you are allowed design deviations, and a design deviation of the second access was asked for and granted after the review of Portneuf Valley Fire District, which is the
governing body on that.
governing body relative to the second access under the fire code.
and one of the things they did discuss was the fire suppression system there, I believe.
That is correct. That's why
Yes.
that tank was added.
That is correct.
Yes. And it was, I believe it's in the transcripts, it was part of the requirement that it be an all-weather access so that that fire tank was available any time of year if there was an emergency.
Correct. And just as a general question, is that the only fire suppression system like that up there? I don't know the answer to that.
Of any subdivision? Yes.
No, in that
area.
In that area, yes.
Okay.
That is not a requirement that was in place when other subdivisions were built
Okay.
under older ordinances.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question on that part. So looking at the transcript of May 31, and this is page 12 of the transcript, and Hal Jensen is speaking, and this is line 24 on page 12, and you say, fire and road safety has not been adequately assessed or addressed. Developer claims that Pocatello Valley Fire District has signed off on the development based on an unsigned and undated letter from Kevin Spencer. The information that I have received says that this development is under review by Pocatello Valley Fire Department.
Which is one of those items that was placed as a condition, which was then met at preliminary plat.
And then this, you also talk about this fire hazard on the northwest corner of Stephanie and Gibson Jack. Does that have anything to do with this, really?
No.
Okay.
Okay, number 3.
Do we have the wording for number 2? Just like to
So
make
it
sure
should,
we're all
the
concurrent.
proposed roads and bridges are designed, a design deviation was requested and was granted. And then our statement is,
The road in question has been reviewed by Bannock County Road and Bridge, whom agreed that the road was already in existence and was granted as a design deviation. The road will stay at 50 feet. The Pocatello Valley Fire had conditions that were met at final plat stage.
and could you just add to that, the secondary access was not deemed feasible due to financial restrictions, and the developer compensated with, what's the proper term, the fire suppression tank?
Well, let me ask something about that first before we finalize that. Wasn't the issue primarily the topography doesn't make it feasible to put in the secondary access? Isn't that
was
what the fire district really talked about there, that you could have rocks falling on the road and stuff like that, even if you tried to make it in that secondary road, would be even more dangerous?
Correct.
Yeah, so let's change that.
That was stated.
That's a good point, John. So the secondary road wasn't needed or
Feasible.
feasible due
Feasible
to
because of the
topography. Yes,
right?
thank
It
you.
wasn't the financial.
It was the topography.
I mean, obviously, there'd be a financial factor, because I would imagine it would cost a fortune if you've got this mountainside you have to tear apart.
Would
Yeah.
the board want me to include both of those then, or do you want me to replace the financial with topography?
I think the record primarily focused on the topography and the danger of adding and cutting into that hillside. So I would like to stay within that.
Okay.
That was a good catch, John. Thank you.
Everybody happy with that one? Number 3.
Number 3 is the proposed partitioning of land does or does not prohibit the extension of dedicated streets or roads, and council answered does not prohibit.
No other future extensions are proposed at this time. Staff learned of an access concern provided by the fire marshal. It appears this concern has been addressed, and the submittal of the letter provided by Mr. Spencer dated April 5th, 2022. I have no concerns with the Limelight Estates. Mr. Ward has worked well with our department. He has complied with all aspects pertaining to the fire concerns. staff finds this item has been met. So.
I think that one's pretty simple.
It answers it.
Yeah. So we agree with staff findings, or let's see, the proposed portion of land does not prohibit that, and we agree with staff findings that no future roads are requested.
Correct.
Number 4.
The proposed partitioning will or will not conflict with legally established easements or access within or adjacent to the proposed partition. And council answered will not conflict.
And then this one, it states that staff recommends that the existing easement be researched by the developer shown on the preliminary plat, which must have happened to move forward with the preliminary plat. That's what I say. We're trying to make statements on something that now we know has been taken care of.
Staff recommends that existing easements be researched by the developer and shown in the preliminary plat. Was that done?
Yes.
That was one of council's findings, is that that would need to be done before moving on as well.
Was that a condition?
It was put in their statement on number 4 of their findings. It's more of a condition, but
It's not the separate conditions part that appeared at the end.
it's not, well, it may also be there as well.
I don't remember seeing it there, but maybe.
But it's written in on number 4
Mhm.
on theirs. But it was a condition, but not in the condition section.
So to the best of our ability, we determined that there were no easement or access information or easement or access issues prior to moving this forward. Because I didn't see anything in the packet that would indicate that there was anything that showed up.
And
I'm trying to remember. Their other statement they made in their finding was that there's conflicting testimony regarding the easements, and I'm trying to remember exactly what the issue was.
isn't that the
Yes.
driveway?
So during the hearing, there was a public comment made that one of the property owners in Gibson Jack Acres, this adjacent subdivision, created an access easement violating their CCNRs. And that's how Jesse Ward, that's how the developer was able to access his road. So that's where Limelight is running through, is that easement that was created. However, based on research completed by staff, the development is not conflicting with any legally established easements. And that easement that was created as part of another subdivision's codes, covenants, and restrictions does not apply to Limelight Estates subdivision. That would be a civil issue with that landowner if anybody wanted to address that.
So I'd just say that per staff findings, no conflict were found. I mean,
Well, that,
it was researched, there wasn't anything, I mean, you just said it. There wasn't anything
but she just said there was something.
What is an established easement?
legal.
What
You
qualifies
can
as
look
an
illegal in
established
a lot of different
easement?
ways.
He didn't record it
And
on a plat.
CCRs are a legal document as well.
So,
Or
Not
through
for us.
Deed.
so deed didn't record it on a plat,
But we
which we
can't-
would have, that would have shown up in our
We'll get to that.
initial review of something like this, correct?
Correct, and it would have shown up through the developer's surveyor, through their respective research. And we had no conflicts. There were no conflicts of any legally established easements.
So would the county have taken ownership of the road or approved the road with an easement like that across it that could cause issues?
I don't think so, no.
I'm sorry, what was your question again?
Would the county have approved and taken ownership of the road if it had a conflicting easement across it?
Well, that seems to be this driveway, which is eventually going to be a road, right?
Could be.
Limelight Lane, as it's presently constituted, the county has accepted, which means when we accepted it, there were no
Limelight Lane
valid.
is not the driveway.
No.
No.
But
Limelight Lane is how you get into the subdivision.
That is correct.
And so the road into the subdivision does not have a valid CCNR on it that we could see because we accepted the road with that, if I'm understanding correctly.
Let me ask another question here. As I read through this, and you can correct me if I'm not interpreting this right, but it seemed to me that there were two parts to this development. And one of them, which I think had room for maybe 4 lots and houses, was through this driveway that there's some, argument about. And then there was another part, which is apparently the majority, which was accessed some other way, but not through the driveway. Is that right or not?
Go ahead.
So there was the minor land division first.
Yes.
As part of the minor land division, they created 3 buildable parcels and then the remaining parcel, which is what they then platted into Limelight Estates. At that time, they did build Limelight Lane through that easement that was accessed via a lot in Gibson Jack Acres.
And that's the part that's in dispute.
Correct.
And so how many lots are accessed through this disputed easement?
I want to say 7.
Because I thought it was the 4. I thought it was only, maybe I have it backwards, but I thought it was 4 you got in that way and 7 you got in the other way.
So as a point of clarification, Commissioner Crowder, the applicant came to us and did a minor land division. Minor land division allows you to basically be complete through staff, no public hearings, okay?
Right.
Okay. Staff can take care of it within 45 to 60 days. They're ready to go to construction. They have open space and buildable or developable lots. At that time, it is not quote-unquote a subdivision, and Limelight is proposed as a driveway. Okay? That's basically under the minor land division, it's basically a driveway.
Limelight Lane.
Limelight Lane.
And just to be clear, that's the part that there's a complaint that it goes over this.
It goes over this lot that is
Okay.
in Gibson Acres.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
So, at that point, Mr. Ward, the developer, now has developed his own personal property as well as sold other available properties, which give him working capital to then go in and pay for improvements and move forward with a platted subdivision, taking the remainder and subdividing, okay? So he chose to do it in 2 steps rather than come to us and say, I'm going to take the next year, year and a half, 2 years, the minor land to do a full plat. My intent is to eventually get to a plat, but I'm going to use the minor land division so that it will provide me some working capital. Fine, we do that all the time with developers in different aspects across the county. That's not uncommon.
What does a minor land division allow you to do?
It allows you to just subdivide into 4 lots or fewer
Okay.
a large piece of ground.
When you say large, what's the minimum size
It has to meet all of the, it has to be large enough to meet all of the requirements
for that particular zone?
of that particular zone.
So if it was a 10-acre lot, for example,
He may only be able to get 2,
You could get-
possibly 3.
oh, you couldn't get 4 2.5s out of it?
Well, it depends on if they chose to do open space how much
Oh, I
density
see.
they want to get. There's a number of choices that they have
Right.
to do. If they were to come to us and say, we're going to do a minor land division, I have 10 acres, I'm going to do a conventional subdivision says you have to do 2 5-acre lots, end of discussion, we're done,
Okay.
okay?
And this is a 30-some-odd acre parcel, I believe.
Correct.
Okay.
So that you're clear, one step first, Limelight is defined as a driveway, not as a road at that point, okay?
Yeah.
Then when he goes to do the plat, he chooses to make sure that he builds Limelight Lane according to county road and bridge standards so that the county will accept it and then maintain it,
Right.
okay?
Down the road.
Down the road.
And that's this driveway that eventually is going to become a road maybe and be a county road.
Correct.
No.
Well, it has become a county road.
Yeah.
Yeah,
At
that's what I
that
was-
stage,
Okay.
yes.
That's what
It
I
is a
said.
county road right now.
And it is a county road. At the final plat, it was signed.
So are we plowing this Limelight Lane right now?
We are. We are.
Um,
There is an extension that comes off Limelight that
Mhm.
serves adjacent properties. That has not been constructed, and that is being defined as a driveway. But Limelight in and of itself, in its entirety, has been
Which is the
dedicated to
part
the
that
county.
was sold by this guy in Gibson Jack.
Correct.
Let me read something else that was said in the transcript, and maybe you can clarify what this means. So this is you speaking again, and this is the transcript of the 5:31 Board of County Commissioners meeting, page 11 of that transcript. And you state, at line 18, "The council did not know that the restrictions and covenants of Gibson Jack subdivision were violated when the owner of Block 1, Lot 5, Daniel Miller, violated those restrictions when he sold .99 acres to Jesse Ward on May 25, 2021, county instrument such and such."
Correct.
So,
Once again, the county has no jurisdiction relative to CCNRs, meaning our office.
So, talking about that,
And the fact that it was not made aware to them has no bearing on their deliberations.
CCRs are covenants within a subdivision.
That is correct.
Are they recorded anywhere
Yes.
by the county or any place else that you readily have access to? Where is a CCR recorded? Just in their own association?
As well as here in the county.
Okay.
Yeah, they're typically recorded in the clerk's office. Newer subdivisions will have the instrument number on the plat so that you can reference the CCNRs. Not all of the older subdivisions have them that way.
But in this situation, you wouldn't have went to another subdivision to look at their CCRs to say what's going to happen in this subdivision.
Correct.
but the county, you say, is now taking this over as a county road. And it's disputed, apparently, whether or not that could have been, what that was allowed to become any other road or any easement whatsoever. And
It's just-
you state here
as a point of
that
comment-
they're in violation.
No, I did not say they're in violation.
The council did not know that the restrictions and covenants of Gibson Jack subdivision were violated when he violated those restrictions. It sounds like you're saying they were violated.
I misspoke.
So,
I mean, for all intents and purposes, under CCNRs, as it states in their CCNRs, yes, violated, okay? I have no jurisdiction over CCNRs. If the developer comes to us and says, this is what I propose to do, and it meets the intent of our ordinance, I can't tell him no.
So, are there other roads up there that have the same issue? That are going through the same covenant issue?
To the best of my knowledge, no, but there may be.
Because does the CCNRs, how far north and south does it go along Stephanie? Do we know?
Do not know at this point.
And once again, they aren't in our record, so I don't
The-
think that
I'm
we need
sorry?
those CCNRs of any subdivision aren't as part of our record, so we can't really consider.
Well, my point was, if there are if these CCNRs cover a broad swath of that hillside, which again, we don't know and it's not in our record, so I get that. It's very likely that there are other roads up there that have done the same thing, that are violating them as well, that would make ours no different, or make this road, excuse me, no different from the others. And again, that's all supposition, because we don't have that in the record.
Correct. And I would suggest we stay clear of things that aren't in the record.
Well, you just go right back to what they stated here. Per their investigation, there was no findings that were violated.
That is correct.
That's-
There were no current easements that were violated.
I mean, that's the finding, per the record.
You read that again, Tristan, please.
The proposed partitioning will not conflict with legally established easements or access within or adjacent to the proposed land partition.
So partitioning the land really doesn't have anything to do with easements per se, right? So I can split it and there can be easements through it, and there's no impact on subdividing the land. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah, so essentially it's saying the proposed subdivision is not going to conflict with any easements that are in that parcel, or it's not going to conflict with the ability to access, or someone else to access the adjacent piece, or any other proposed subdivision in the future, is really what that finding is saying.
So what, again, I just want to restate what you said. This lane, Limelight Lane, does not prohibit access to any other easement or CCNR that exists in that area.
Correct.
And we're only concerned about easements, not CCNRs, because we have no governance over CCNRs.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is causing me some pause. And especially now that you say we've taken this over as a road. Because if I understand this correctly, you've got this Gibson Jack subdivision, and it has certain CCRs, which the one party is claiming do not permit an easement to be given away.
Correct.
And we apparently should know that, since this all is filed with us. And now, even though that's the case in these CCRs, which we can read, we have put a county road in violation of those CCRs, it sounds like, on this property.
When was the road put in? You know?
I would say early 2022,
21?
yeah, late 21.
Okay. So, but that has nothing to do with this right here, with this,
That is correct.
from what we're talking about. That was done prior. So it has nothing to do, for the record, of what was presented.
Well, it's discussed. It's discussed here. I just read the transcript. So it has something to do with it.
But it's hearsay.
Hearsay.
Yeah.
This is testimony that we got from him.
No, but it's still hearsay because no record was presented. No CCR was
Do you have a
presented.
copy of
And
the
that's what we
CCRs?
that's what we keep talking about.
Nope.
There was never in this a CCR presented.
We don't enforce CCNRs.
I understand that, but I thought you said earlier in this conversation, or one of you said, that the CCRs are on file with the county.
It should be. But that's for that subdivision, not for this subdivision.
And in this meeting, there was a lot of testimony, in the meeting where they brought this forward, this big packet that I have here that we've been reading through. There were several people that made statements in opposition to this subdivision. And one of the reasons they opposed it was because of this driveway. So this testimony did come out, and these statements were made. So it wasn't like people were unaware that there was a conflict here.
Once again, we have no jurisdiction relative to CCNRs. If Mr. Ward, the developer, and the adjacent property owner go into a private transaction, okay, and they create an easement, I can't tell them no, because I have no jurisdiction over CCNRs. CCNRs are applicable to that subdivision. That then becomes a civil matter between private parties, a homeowners association and the man who went into the negotiation who violated the CCNRs.
This was a big topic of discussion, not only with testimony from the public, but it was also a topic of discussion that looked pretty extensive with the Planning and Zoning Council. And in fact, in their conditions, so I'm going to jump to that, they say, developer to resolve all conflicts between restrictive covenants of Gibson Jack access to satisfaction between P&D staff and county legal. That's one of the conditions.
Which they did.
Okay. And how did they resolve that to the satisfaction of P&D staff? Because it sounds like it's not resolved if there's a lawsuit over it and people are still discussing this. How was it resolved?
You're jumping ahead now. I mean, to me, we're talking about two different things. Right now, we're talking about the concept. And if that was put in as a conditional use, then it was taken care of. And now that they've gone to final plat, it's been taken care of.
Has it been?
It wouldn't have went to final plat if it hadn't been.
Well, I've seen a lot of things that shouldn't be done that are done, and people didn't do it correctly.
Well, they made, you just said it though, they made a statement in there that says this needs to be taken care of. So we're not even talking about final plat right now. All we're talking about is the conception and what we have before us.
And if I'm understanding correctly, based on what you just said, Hal, this should actually be a civil issue, not a county issue, because
That is correct.
like you said, we had a property owner and a developer made an agreement, and that has nothing to do with us.
The adjacent property owner did something that was in violation of the CCNR. That's a civil issue between the homeowners association and that property owner. Has nothing to do, I don't enforce CCNRs.
Correct. So I understand where John's concern is, and I don't disagree. If that's not our issue. Our issue is our records didn't indicate anything that would prevent us from moving forward with this based on what we were able to find legally at that time.
Correct. Under a public hearing, this was presented against the subdivision of land, okay?
Correct.
Mr. Ward was seeking opportunities on how to access from a legal right-of-way, which is Stephanie, to his property, which he then went into discussion and provided us a 50-foot easement, which eventually became, under final plat, a dedicated right-of-way with a developed road that met road and bridge standards for development with sub-base asphalt. Tested, provided testing that it met all of the requirements for compaction, etc. That's what I have jurisdiction over. And under the concept plan, it was discussed. And then it was stated as one of the conditions that they needed to resolve that to our satisfaction. Satisfaction was the fact that it met the county right-of-way standards. 50 feet wide, utility easements on each side, a pavement section of 20 feet, 24 foot wide with shoulders, etc.
It also said that it was resolved to the satisfaction of county legal.
I'm not county legal.
That's right. And there's a county legal. There's a legal issue. There's a legal dispute on this. Were you guys in county legal asked about this, and did you sign off and say, yes, this conflict has been resolved?
I'm not all county legal, so I can't answer for Brian. I don't recall having any conversations, but I do know that Brian did have conversations regarding mine weight. I wasn't party to all those conversations, so I couldn't answer yes or no on what.
And that wouldn't occur until final plat though, correct? Until the very end?
Correct. But that has already happened, well, yeah. I know that there were some discussions, I just don't know the particulars of those discussions.
So we can't say with certainty that this has been resolved.
Well, once again, this is, we're putting, the cart was put before the horse by someone other than us, but.
What do you mean by that?
Meaning, we're doing this in reverse order because of the judicial review. But we really can't even consider any of these things that happened after the fact because they are not part of the record. So the fact that.
What I'm talking about is part of the record.
And it was taken care of in the statement here, that as far as they know, everything was reviewed with the suggestion of looking further. That's what
Well,
it
it's
says
actually
right there
more
in
than a
4.
suggestion, a condition. That it was conditioned both in number 4 as well as in the conditions that it meet certain criteria.
But when this document, when they was doing the conception, this is what they had to go by. Meaning that later, when they did the preliminary plat and the final plat, that they must have had an answer then. But we're not talking about that.
It doesn't mean they must have had an answer. It means we hope they had an answer.
Well, but
Because
we're
we
not
don't
even
know.
talking about that.
Mhm.
They put a condition in there to say, look into this before you go further. It doesn't mean that we can't okay this part of it.
I have an issue with this. It's not clear to me that this was resolved, that this condition was met, and that does seem to relate to condition 4. But I'm ready to move on to the next thing if you want.
Okay. Number 5.
The blocks of lots are or are not located and laid out to properly relate to adjoining or nearby lot or parcel lines, utilities, streets, or other existing or planned facilities. And council answered, lots are located and laid out.
And that's where, like I say, it's a conception. They haven't actually put anything solid down to paper saying this is exactly where it's going to go. So by what it looks like, everything looks like it meets the criteria.
Do we have any criteria that dictates, like everything must be square, everything must be lined out?
We
I
do
mean,
not.
how do we define laid out properly? How would you define that?
Well, Hal said it earlier. Where are you going to put water and sewer? You're going to put your easements in the front of the properties instead of running them through the back of the properties. I mean, every subdivision is a little bit different depending on where the utilities come in. But you look at the surrounding utilities, what makes sense? They're going to do it where it's the cheapest.
Commissioner Huff, you asked a question relative to absolutes of a very nebulous statement.
Well, and that's where I was going is.
It's one of the worst
will-
items relative to subdivision that is in our ordinance. That's terribly stated.
Yeah. I mean, basically it
It's-
comes down to will it fit?
It's subjective,
Yeah.
completely subjective. And
Based
so
on
you're asking
topography.
for absolute findings about lots and blocks and et cetera. You're talking about lots and blocks as though we're in the city of Pocatello or the city of Chubbuck or wherever it might be as a platted subdivision with et cetera. We're on a hillside with contours that have drainage valleys and elements that aren't developable and others that are. And so it becomes subjective to us in the review as well as our recommendations to council that yes, it does.
Yeah.
How do you give an absolute to that? Yes, it does, based upon the fact that we subjectively looked at it and said, yes, it does. Sorry.
No, I was just trying to figure out how to word this
You
one.
hit the bird under my saddle relative to that particular issue in the subdivision ordinance because it's poorly worded and it's always been
Yeah.
difficult to give an absolute to.
Well, that was my point, is there is no way to say it's properly lined out. Just does it fit? Does the infrastructure, road, things make sense with future plans?
Potentials, et cetera.
Yeah.
Well, and to help too, it is laid out based on the topography and terrain where lots are in locations that there are flatter areas for houses to be placed. It's laid out, I think Idaho Power had a comment saying that they had no concerns as far as where utilities
Correct.
were going, so you could say it's laid out efficiently according to utility placement and the access for your fire suppression tank. That is a future planned facility that has now been installed, and those blocks and lots were laid out according to where that future facility was going to be placed as well.
So if we were to take a stab at wording this, the blocks and lots are laid out properly due to comments from the utility companies, the potential for city utilities to be implemented, and the fire suppression system all fit within the topography and design of the subdivision.
Do you want me to read what I've got down, what I've got right for this?
Sure.
Says, according to staff, this condition has been met as it pertains to their findings. The Bannock County ordinance, as it is written currently, is extremely subjective and less clear than that of municipalities would be based on their specific ordinances' potential future development.
I listened to what Jeff said better.
Okay.
I don't want to put something in there criticizing our ordinances.
It's about to be overturned. That's the only reason
I
we're
don't,
developing it.
nah, I
Okay.
don't want to throw that in front of the judge.
Jeff, how would you like to,
Dang it.
what was your train of thought?
I was just riffing. You can't expect me to remember that
Some
stuff.
Topography.
Based on included testimony from utilities and Pocatello's proposed utility placement, the lots were designed,
Fire suppression.
lots and fire suppression. Yeah, fire suppression with the utilities. The lots were laid out in accordance to that and the topography of the land.
Okay.
I'm gonna start writing my own riffs down.
That's a pretty good riff.
All right, number 6.
The proposed property is or is not physically suitable for the type and proposed density of development and does or does not conform to existing zone standards. And the council answered the proposed property is physically suitable and does conform to existing zone standards.
What do they mean by physically suitable? Is it talking about slope, grade?
Yes, which is somewhat what your previous statement was. The areas that are, as Tristan commented, the areas which are more flat and more developable for construction, and areas that are not were dedicated to open space.
But again, if I just say, this property is developed in a manner that's in accordance or typical of the other developments in that area. It's consistent with the developments in that area.
Okay. Very similar to the subdivision directly west uphill, which is Wild Horse Ridge.
Yeah.
The subdivision lays out similar to Wild Horse Ridge.
So from a statement of fact, is that consistent with what we have in the record, or can I say something like that?
Road follows the ridge.
Yeah, I don't think the Wild Horse Ridge was discussed in the record, at least not to my recollection, maybe it was, but,
No.
so I wouldn't rely on that. But the topography was part of the record, to a certain extent at least. And so you can certainly.
So if we said it's consistent with the topography of the surrounding area,
The
existing topography or existing,
Yeah, existing topography. Yeah.
because if we go back to what John was saying earlier, I've gone up there and driven around looking at this, so that's why I'm saying we can, if we say consistent with surrounding development. and topography. Is that a fair statement, based on what we're trying to accomplish here?
It's physically suitable for the type and proposed density of development and does conform to existing zone standards. Is that what we're looking at?
Yes.
And so, couldn't we say something like, based on the acreage, topography, and the comments from, and the information obtained from public utilities, it does meet this requirement?
Done with that?
Is that satisfactory?
I'd like a little more concrete statements, like, instead of conclusion, it sounds a little more conclusive.
Given that the topography is level and suitable for construction of homes, that the acreage is large enough for the available homes to meet our zoning standards, and that the utilities can be placed in accordance with the information we've received from the utilities, it meets this standard.
Yeah, that's got some more specifics in it, so that's. Is there any other areas that we need to worry about on this one, as far as, like, what are our zoning standards?
It meets the density requirements.
Meets lot size and density requirements.
It's density requirements.
Okay.
So could we, you okay if we add that? And it meets the existing lot size and density standards,
Requirements.
requirements.
There's no need for a variance of any kind there, so.
No.
It was all answered in number 1. I mean, it goes through every one of these things in number 1. Exactly. We highlight them out.
Did we get them all?
That's all 6. The only other thing was,
The list that Brian sent?
well, there's the conditions, as was brought up earlier on the commissioners. I don't know how you want to address the conditions section, if you want to place conditions, recognizing it's kind of after the fact, but still. Are there certain conditions, or these same conditions, that what you want as requirement for this plat, for this?
Quick provisions of clarification. Conditions also allow the concept plan to move forward to make sure that it is complying with ordinance. So I think we should go through conditions and look at the reasoning why the condition was placed and why it helped move it forward from concept to preliminary. As a point of clarification for the judicial review. That would be my recommendation.
So that's items for the council to consider, the 9 there. So is that the conditions?
Correct.
This right here, I think.
Yeah.
These are the conditions that were submitted by the Planning and Zoning Department. Council, I mean.
Yeah, council. And so, number 1 is with regards to an email, and I don't know if anyone has access to that, but it might be good to know what that is in that email in order to determine whether or not that's an appropriate condition.
Okay.
Should have been part of the original appeal packet. I'll see if I can find what page it's on.
Tristan, there were a whole string of emails about a quarter of the way down that attachment. I don't think mine have page numbers on it, but
The conditions were at the end, right? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yes.
Well, there's really 5. They crossed one out
Correct.
and numbered it incorrectly.
You want to read it? Number 1?
Consider all items in email dated fall of 2022.
I think that's February 11.
Yes.
Oh, February 11th. Okay, thank you. who has that email, or is that included in the packet?
It should be in the packet. I'm looking for it.
So while you're looking for that, let's look at number 2. Number 2, strongly encourage developer to work with City of Pocatello to connect sewer and water. City of Pocatello was not ready to move forward at this time, is that correct?
That is correct.
So I would say that they met that because of the way they designed the septics and the water being in front, so that when Pocatello does go up that way, they're ready to connect.
Correct.
So I would say number 2 has been met. Do we need to put more flesh on that?
And once again, we don't.
No, but we don't have to change anything. That's just a condition that we put there.
Yeah.
We don't have to have the answer to it.
So
We
why
we
are we
don't
talking
need
about
to
conditions?
make a
then?
finding as to whether or not they did or did not meet the conditions.
If we was talking about the preliminary plat, then we'd look at that. And if we was talking about the final plat, then we'd look at that.
Correct.
But these are just conditions that were placed by the board. So it has nothing to do with accepting or not accepting this end of it, in my opinion.
So,
I mean,
Yeah, my understanding was that we were making reasoned statements on each of the findings. So
Drawing a conclusion.
conditions aren't part of the findings.
They're not part of the findings? Why is it on this form?
Not of the criteria that we needed reasoned findings on. They're part of the decision, but they aren't part of the 6 criteria of approval.
It seems to me if the conditions are not met, we have a problem.
That's in the preliminary plat and the final plat, though, not in the conditional. Because we're making the conditions. They were making the conditions at this point.
Which allows.
We're not saying whether they're finishing them or not. We're just saying we're making these at this point.
Conditions allow the developer to continue moving forward, and they report back their particular efforts and conclusions at preliminary plat, and report back to us.
And I'd say at this point, we can't add conditions. We could have wiped out all the conditions when it come before us,
Correct.
but we can't. And we could have added conditions at that time, but not now, not after they've already jumped ahead and done the next 2 stages.
Those conditions are placed to allow them to move forward. If those conditions weren't met at preliminary plat, then we would not have allowed them to move forward to final plat.
Well, it doesn't look like their 4th condition was met. At least I haven't seen any evidence that it was from the legal standpoint.
Okay.
But when it first come to us, they had time to go and meet that condition. Because then that should have been questions that were asked during the preliminary plat and the final plat.
I
It has
agree. It certainly
nothing to
should've.
do with this, where we're at right now.
Mm-hmm. I disagree.
I understand your
This is the
frustration.
record.
I just understand your frustration, but if we're doing the time frame with what we are looking at, that has nothing to do with this conversation here today.
Well, I'm going to have to say I just can't agree with that. If this is part of the record and this is what we're supposed to be signing off on, then I want to make sure.
We're
and this
signing
is
off
why
on a
I-
conditional
Mhm.
permit, which says, this is where we were 2 years ago. We're going back 2 years. We're not changing the questions that we're asking. We're not adding to or taking away
I'm not
from.
changing, and I'm not adding to.
And we're not
I'm
giving,
looking at the record.
but we're not giving answers to either.
But
Well,
the
we are.
No. You can't answer the questions that they put on a conditional use.
What, well,
So-
I'm talking about all these things that we're making statements about. The conditions are part of this.
So that condition, it being met, isn't going to be part of the record that you're reviewing because they made that condition as part of this record. If you were looking at the preliminary plat record and a transcript from the preliminary plat, then you would see that condition has been met. But we're looking at the record from that condition being met. So if we're sitting here on April 20th, 2022, we can't see into the future at the preliminary plat stage if that condition has been met yet. So that's why you don't see whether that condition has been met as part of the record that you're reviewing.
But I asked the question, that's why I asked the question, had it been met? And the answer I have so far is, don't think so,
No, the answer was, it had to be
It has
met.
been
by
met.
him. The legal could not tell me that he had addressed this statement.
Because he wasn't privy to those conversations.
Mhm.
But we did get the answer from our staff that says those conditions had to be met or they wouldn't have given the final plat.
Hal, can you tell me definitively that legal signed off on this CCR issue?
No, nor was that,
We don't have anything to do with the CCR.
nor was that part of these 6 items.
But it's part of the conditions.
It's part of the conditions, which then went to preliminary
That's my
plat, which
question.
then went to final plat.
Yeah.
But you're asking us to read the future from this, when this document.
You're asking to
Well,
make
no,
a
now I'm
judgment.
asking him to read the past.
But that has nothing to do with our discussion right now.
That is correct.
Okay, well, I disagree.
I will disagree with him because we can't discuss that.
Judicial review was remanded back to the commission to develop on those 6 items further reason and rationale and defensible position about why it was allowed to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
So,
And the conditions were placed to allow them to continue to move forward to preliminary plat.
so if we sign off on all this today, then the appellate has 28 days, right, to come in and appeal our today's decision. Is that correct?
Well,
When does it go back to the courts?
Yeah, is this considered a decision that would
I don't think it goes back to the courts. I
Be
think it comes
allowed-
to us.
reconsideration? Because that's what it would be. It would be a 14-day reconsideration if it's considered a decision.
This is the reconsideration decision, right?
This is it.
It should be.
This is it.
Brian said that this will become a resolution Tuesday. Something that.
I'm sorry,
So,
repeat that?
But it's their written decision on the
Correct.
reconsideration, so it's their last.
This is it.
Okay.
Correct.
So, to the best of my knowledge, this starts the 28-day clock ticking
Back over
for them to
to do
appeal.
a new judicial review.
Correct.
Yep,
To go back to the courts again. Is that what you're saying?
if they choose to.
Back to the courts or back to us, or we're done.
I think it's just, it ends here with you guys, from my
Okay.
understanding.
I'm
And that's
sorry?
what
And then the,
It goes
whoever
back
brought
to
us
the
to
courts.
initially,
They can file
Right.
judicial, unless the
yeah.
court will consider
Those two, I
it. I'm
think
not
their
sure. I haven't
estates
seen any.
can then choose to go back.
So
to-
we make a decision today. Let's say one of the parties doesn't like the decision.
Mhm.
Let's say the party that sued in the first place doesn't like it, the plaintiff. Then it goes back to the courts again. Is that what happens?
If the
If they
estate-
want to, they have
if the
28
estate
days to go
chooses
back.
to, yes, I believe that's the case.
So they may not go back, and then
Right.
everything's done.
Right.
And
The
if they do
initial
go
two-
back, then the judge, now he has his data, and I guess the court case continues.
The initial appellants have both since passed away,
Right.
and there hasn't been a ton of action by their estates. So if the estates were to choose to, I believe they can take it back.
And their
Okay.
estates were notified of this meeting today and that we would be making a decision today. I believe Brian sent.
I believe, yeah, Brian said he was
sent
gonna take care of
notification
that.
out yesterday.
Right. Yesterday. How much notification are we required to get?
That's going above and beyond. Yesterday was
It was
going
on,
above
it's
and
been on our
beyond
agenda, so.
Okay,
what is normally required.
I see. All right.
Because
And-
it's been on our agenda for a week,
Right.
so we've met our legal obligations, but when Brian and I talked yesterday, we thought it was fair to notify them,
Okay.
so,
Okay, so I'm just going to run through this one more time,
Yeah.
just to make sure I'm clear.
no,
So, decision is rendered today. That starts the clock running for the,
either side.
either side to appeal back to the courts where this was.
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, our decision is the final decision, so if either side wants to appeal.
And
it
it's not
goes-
on either side, because we are the other side.
Well, yeah, so if the.
I mean,
It's only the
we're not the
original
other side.
appellant.
The original
who has
appellant
the
wants to, then it
opportunity.
has to go to court, not back to us, because we are the final judicial ruling on this. So if they want to appeal, it goes to the court.
Okay, but if nobody appeals, then this is done, the development continues, and everything's
That's the way I
finished,
understand
right?
it.
That's how I understand it as well, but I could be wrong.
Do you think I'm incorrect, or do you have any comment on that? Does that sound right?
I don't have any further information on that right now, so.
All right.
all right. Comments, questions?
I found something else while we were discussing all this other stuff. Let me just look here real quick. I'm going to jump all the way back to all the way back to item 1, and this is, so I'm going back to, give me just a second here, okay? I've got to find the right page. Okay. Okay, here we are. And this is still you speaking, Hal. I'm reading another quote from this transcript. And this is on page, from the same transcript as before, May 31, page 12, starting at line 6. You say, there was a letter from Ellen Johnson, professional engineer from Department of Environmental Quality, directed to me, dated April 7th, 2022. It says it does not approve Limelight Estates concept as presented due to the following. Proposed development overlays the groundwater capture zones for several nearby wells and has potential to impact at least one public water system, City of Pocatello well number 3. The combined annual affluent from the proposed 11 septic systems would be 1.2 million gallons. This affluent will reach and contaminate groundwater beneath the subdivision. End quote. Has there been any further information from DEQ?
No.
So is this, do you have any comment on this statement? Is this statement correct as I've read it here? And we can assume that this is the DEQ's position?
Can I jump in here?
When you say
Yeah.
position, what do you mean position?
Well, I'm assuming you went
That's
to
a That's a
DE.
statement, but the position would be of denial, and we didn't have a statement of denial. They had a statement of recommendation,
Okay, so they recommended what?
that they do certain things relative to their septic tank and their drain fields.
In order to meet this issue that they've raised here.
Correct.
And did they do those steps?
No.
No.
So DEQ's letter was a recommendation of 3 separate options. They recommended council place a condition to require the developer to do one of 3 things: connect to a community well, do a nutrient pathogen study, or provide a centralized wastewater system. Because it was a recommendation and not a requirement by DEQ, council did not place a condition to require any of those 3 things. So it was not necessary to move on to preliminary or final plat to conduct any of those 3 things.
That is a copy and paste letter that we get on every single subdivision.
Is that true?
Yes.
That is correct.
And so so it sounds like we basically ignore the letter,
Who
the
has,
recommendations.
who has
Just we don't-
jurisdiction
we don't
over
implement
septic
them.
systems?
Yeah, so DEQ has the jurisdiction over water.
Mhm.
So if they wanted it to be done, the letter would have to be a requirement because council does not have the jurisdiction to place that requirement. So if all council has is a recommendation, then a condition does not get placed.
I would note that in the conditions, it was a strongly encouraged to work with the city of Pocatello, which is not truly a condition, but, you know, it's discussing it to a certain extent, that they should work with the city of Pocatello to get connected to water and sewer, but it's not per se condition.
And that's not part of our 6 items here, but so that you know, those conversations were held between the developer and the city of Pocatello. I don't know what his formal title is. Engineer of development or something, and basically was told not at this time.
So every time we get these letters from DEQ, they're telling us, oh yeah, if you do this, it's going to contaminate the groundwater?
Pretty much.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I can
They
show
couched
you.
it a little bit more, but saying it may contaminate.
Commissioner
It's-
Crowder.
It's more,
This says will.
that's, if you read the actual letter, it's more,
Commissioner Crowder, I can provide you a copy of the exact same form letter to Franklin County, Madison County, other counties, and it says the exact same thing. It is a form letter, and it is a recommendation. Okay? If it came back that you will, that you shall, absolute, then
But that would be DEQ's responsibility to do something about this.
that's because it's their jurisdiction.
And so if they wanted to do something about it, they would, I guess, tell the developer, you can't do this because it's gonna contaminate the groundwater, and then if the developer did it anyway, then I guess they would go to court over it. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else?
Just to answer, I just had a call from Brian to answer your question about the appeal process. It was sent back without instructions from the judge, so he's not exactly sure what the next step would be. But he's got emails in and they just haven't got a response yet. So he said just worry about getting the decision today and then he'll take care of the rest.
Okay,
So do we need a motion on,
you've got all 6 questions answered.
Yep.
Okay. Any further comments, questions?
you okay?
I'm not okay, because I have a issue with 4 and I have an issue with the 1 condition. Those are the only issues I have, but I do have those issues.
What's the condition?
The condition is, I'll read it again here. Developer resolve all conflicts between restrictive covenants of Gibson Jack Acres to satisfaction between county P&D staff and county legal. And I don't think that was done.
Or I go back to what I told you.
Hmm?
It can't be, it wasn't done. It wasn't done at the time, or they wouldn't have made the condition.
No, I'm saying I don't think it's yet been done.
But,
Based
But
on
it's not
based
part
on
of what
I've
we're
heard.
doing here.
Okay, well, we're just gonna have a disagreement on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, give me a motion.
So, Mr. Chair, I would move that we accept the, what's the proper term, our findings of fact as outlined.
And just excuse me a second here, the findings of fact are basically accepting all the conditions, right? Did you say
1
we-
through 6.
Yes. That you say all the conditions are, but that's what you're making the motion,
Okay,
right?
So I don't know that it'd be accepting, it'd be addressing all the conditions,
In favorably.
So
what it sounds like.
how about, since you're opposed to number 4, if we broke them out individually so you could oppose that one, and then we could go through the other ones.
you're still going to the future. And I agreed that you're saying that maybe it hasn't been done, but when this document was done, that was put in there as a condition. Something that's gonna happen in the future. So,
Well, and all I'm trying to do is allow John some room to say, no, he doesn't agree.
well,
And we still go through each of the conditions and say, we agree with this, we agree with this, we agree with this, yes, yes, no.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
That way we still move forward, but John's objection is noted and it's not
Yeah,
lumped into
the whole thing.
the whole thing.
That seems reasonable.
Alan, do you think that will work?
Yeah.
Okay, so, Mr. Chair, I would move that on findings of fact 1, we approve it and move forward.
you have a motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion, I would move that on finding of fact number 2, that we approve and go forward.
You have a motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Mr. Chair, on finding of fact number 3, I would move that we approve and go forward.
You have a motion,
Aye. Oh, sorry.
we have a motion, all in favor say aye.
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 Mr. Chair, on finding of fact number 4, I would move that we approve and go forward.
You have a motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
No.
Mr. Chair, I would move that on finding of fact number 5, we approve and go forward.
You have a motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And then, Mr. Chair, on finding of fact number 6, I would move that we approve and go forward.
You have a motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, with that being said, we are adjourned.
And we'll find out what's next in the process.